Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K. Anil Kumar, Assistant Professor, Discipline of Anthropology, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Today we will discuss about the module Definition of Tribes, Critical Assessment of Conflicting Definition from the paper Tribal Cultures of India. So students, let us see what we are going to learn in this module. In this module, we learn about various definitions of tribes and their classifications. We will also learn the history and origin behind the term tribe and know the issues related with its definition. We will also try to understand the conceptualization on the term tribe in ancient, medieval and present context, as well as learn the various transformations and changes that are occurring among the tribal communities. When we hear or read the term tribe, we assume a picture in our mind from our experiences and knowledge gathered. Some of us may bring out the picture of some tribal communities belonging to central India and eastern India. Some may think of tribes belonging to northern and western India, while some may assume the picture of northeastern tribes. Even some may also think about tribes belonging to Andaman and Nicobar Islands. This is just a small picture of imagination when we take the term tribe, while in reality, when we talk the tribes in a broader sense, we may think of tribe not only confined to India but in the whole world, and also various types and categories of tribes like scheduled tribe, particular vulnerable tribal groups, etc. Ex-criminal tribes, denotified or nomadic tribes, hunter-gatherers tribe, backward tribes, forest tribes, and maybe some other existing forms too. The whole concept and notion of tribal is different and various from individual to individual. The definition of the term tribe will vary from the definition by layman to the definition provided by an anthropologist or sociologist compared to the definition provided by an administrator or a special worker or a researcher. Unfortunately or interestingly, even people who are involved with the tribes and tribal issues, they also vary in their opinions, practically or theoretically, on the concept of tribe. Definition of tribe. Various attempts have been made to classify or to define the term tribe by many scholarly researchers. According to Imperial Gazetteer of India, a tribe is a collection of families bearing a common name, speaking a common dialect, occupying or professing to occupy a common territory, and is not usually endogamous, though originally it might have been so. According to Shalins, a tribe is a segment origination. It is composed of a number of equivalent unspecialized multifamily groups, each the structural duplicate of the other. A tribe is a congregate of equal kin group blocks. According to Oxford Dictionary, a tribe is a group of people in a primitive or barbarous stage of development, acknowledging the authority of a chief and usually regarding themselves as descendants of a common ancestors. According to G.W. B. Huntford, a tribe is a group united by a common name in which the members take pride by common language, by common territory, and by a feeling that all who do not share their name are outsiders, enemies in fact. It is simplest form, the tribe is a group of bands occupying a contiguous territory or territories and having a feeling of unity deriving from numerous similarities in culture, frequent contacts, and a certain community of interest, given by Ralph Linton. Lucy Mayer also defines a tribe as an independent political division of a population with a common culture. According to D. N. Majumdar, a tribe is a social group with territorial affiliation, endogamous, with no specialization of functions, ruled by tribal officers, hereditary or otherwise, united in language or dialect, recognizing social distance with other tribes or caste without any social obloquy attaching to them, as it does in the caste structure, followed tribal tradition, beliefs and customs, illiberal of naturalization of ideas from alien sources, above all conscious of homogeneity of ethnic and territorial integrations. According to Morton Fried, tribe is a breeding population whose boundaries circumscribes the range of sexual relations, not only unsanctioned sexual unions but also socially approved marriages that frequently take place across the boundaries of what are called tribe. As defined by an East Asian consultation at Sagada, Philippines, a tribal is a group of people generally constituting a homogeneous unit, speaking a common language, claiming a common ancestry, living in a particular geographic area, generally lacking in scientific knowledge and modern technology, and having a social structure based on kinship. Contextualizing the problems faced by tribes in India, T.B. Naik, 1968, came up with his own criteria to define a tribe, which are as follows. A community can be termed as a tribe if it is not highly interdependent within the community, unlike Hindu caste system. A community using primitive means to exploit the natural resources, whose economy is backward or underdeveloped with no understanding of monetary economy, may be termed as a tribe. A tribal community must be geographically isolated from the mainstream population. Members of a tribe should have their own common dialect, which may vary from other tribal communities or regions. A strong and influential political organization or head should be present within a tribe. The member of a tribe should have a sort of psychological conservation towards change and should follow their age old customs. Customary laws must be an important feature of a tribal community which could maintain the peace and order of the community. Classifications of tribes. Understanding the term tribe has been very difficult in a universally accepted situation. Thus, researchers and scholars have tried to understand the term tribe by classifying them into various categories. For example, Warrior Elwin in 1944 in his book The Aboriginals attempted to categorize tribes into four groups. They are as follows: purest to pure tribal groups who are in closeness to people living in plain areas but still have maintained the tribal mode of living. Tribal groups who are placed in the lower strata of Hindu society. Groups who are fully emerged into the Hindu faith and tradition, thus having a modern way of living. B. K. Roy Burman, 1972, tried to classify tribes into further four categories in order to have a more clear understanding of the community within Hindu society. Thus, it categorized this tribe as tribes who are already incorporated in a Hindu society, tribes who are much oriented towards Hindu society, tribes who have a negative or repulsive behavior and orientation towards Hindu society, tribes who behave indifferently towards Hindu society, and furthermore, LP Vidyarthi and Rai 1977 also classified tribes into various categories as follows: tribes living in forest areas, tribes living in rural areas and villages, tribes who are semi-cultured, tribes who are influenced by acculturation, tribes who are influenced by assimilation. Even after various classification or categorization of the tribal communities, no common and universal understanding of the term has yet been arrived. Student, let us know about the history and origin of the term tribe. The term tribe is basically of colonial origin. The colonial government classified communities in terms of their size of population, distinctive language, and cultural traits, isolated ecological condition, and their condition of living. Further, such groups were characterized as primitive, uncivilized, and backward, and were designated as tribes. According to the British, the term tribe had various connotations or more than one sense in Indian society. Tribes were known to be a group of people who claimed their descent from a common ancestor in their way of living was subsumed to be very primitive or barbaric. According to Professor Khaka, he writes in the census reports of 1881, when the first proper All India census was undertaken, the term used was not tribe but forest tribe, and that too as a subheading within the broader category of agricultural and pastoral caste. In the next two censuses of 1901 and 1911, Sir Herbert Risley and Sir E. A. Gate respectively added another term so called animist. Again in 1921 census, Martin altered the tag from animism to tribal religion. Dr. Hutton in 1931 census followed census report of 1891 headed by Bainis but changed the term forest tribe and introduced a primitive tribe. Among all the researcher and scholars, it was only Gure who refused to accept the term tribe as a category propounded by the colonial regime and described these groups as a backward Hindus. After independence, the term scheduled tribe came into use and the so-called tribal communities were designated as STs by the Constitution of India. Srivastava 2003 mentions the criteria evolved by a local committee by declaring a particular group as a scheduled tribe. The criteria are mentioned as follows: a group showing primitive traits, a group must have a distinctive culture, it should be geographically isolated, the group should be isolated and away from the outside world and may have reservation to open up. Last, the community should be backward group. These criteria proposed to be described or define a group as a scheduled tribe was later criticized and debated for using the term like primitive, backward, savage in the report. Along with the term scheduled tribe, another term also came into existence known as primitive tribal group, which was later known as particularly vulnerable tribal group. This particularly vulnerable tribal group, that is PVGT, is supposed to be more backward than the others. To identify such groups, few criteria are used on the basis of which further the groups are classified as a particular vulnerable tribal group. They are as follows: the tribal groups which are now in primitive agriculture stage. Second, tribal group who dwell in isolation and have remote habitations. Third, the tribal groups which are very small in numbers. Fourth, the tribal groups whose population is near constant or at declining stage. Fifth, groups with very low level of literacy. And sixth, the tribal groups which are very much economically, socially backward. The above criteria are generally followed to classify the ASTs as a primitive vulnerable tribal groups, that is PVGT, but it also needs lots of discussion to throw light on the sensitive issues like PVGTs. However, the colonial term tribe got replaced by the term scheduled tribe and is presently used at common parallels to all the tribal communities by the Constitution of India. Issues related with the definition of the term tribe. In various anthropological articles and usages, the term is being equated with the term primitive. Roy Berman, 1983, referring to a paper published by Maurice Godelier, says that there are two sets of characteristic features that comes out from the term primitive. One is negative and the other one is positive. In Western societies, we find the positive trait of being primitive, whereas negative trait of being primitive is found in our societies like less civilized, use of traditional simple tools and small scale in nature. In any sense, primitive societies are mostly considered to be inferior. While discussing the concept of primitive, Cooper 1988 mentions that the history of the theory of primitive society is the history of an illusion. Cooper also points out that the whole notion of being primitive was brought out by Europeans, especially in 19th century, so that the Europeans could understand themselves and their own selves in a better way. Moreover, the term primitive became primitive or was forcibly made into primitive simply because of various theoretical debates by Channa 2008. Professor Channa 2008 also writes in her article that it was not tribes who discovered the anthropology, rather the anthropologists discovered the tribes, thus conceptualizing the whole notion of tribe into a negative or positive sense in our responsibility. The tribes are not in any way to be blamed or involved in it. Moreover, the concept of tribe emerged from a situation which featured the superiority of white man, colonial dominance, and industrialization. Conceptualization of tribes in anthropology. Various anthropological research and works are being conducted from very beginning of the concept and study of tribes. Especially, anthropologists are known to have experts on tribes. The anthropologists first tried to understand and differentiate tribes from the civilization. Since hundreds of years, tribes and civilization existed together without any distinction. Thus, the first attempt was to distinguish tribes and civilization. Andre Bete notes two types of approaches which could help to understand the relationship between the tribes and civilization is a more clear way. The first type of approach is evolutionary approach, which provides a long range view of time and also focuses on the steps of social formation. Whereas the second type of approach is historical approach, which is almost contrast to the previous one. The historical approach limits itself to a particular framework of space and time and points out the coexistence of social formation, unlike the evolutionary approach. In India, the scenario of understanding and defining a tribe is very different. The main issue that arises in a country like India is to identify a tribe than defining it. Although the Constitution of India has provided various tribes with a tag of scheduled tribe, yet there are many communities which are still to be identified and recognized. This act of identifying tribes become very difficult in India because mostly tribes are entangled with another category named caste. Thus, many times communities which are classified as tribes in one area are also termed as caste in another area. This happens often because many of the tribal communities dwell in nearby areas to caste communities, thus creating problem and confusion in their classifications. Therefore, the effort to identify tribes which began in British India led to various misinterpretations and confusions. Even today, in various census data records, the census enumerates also get confused with the distinction between tribes and caste. In such a situation, it is only the anthropologists and the researchers who actually work among the tribe can provide a clear picture of tribal identity. Tribes and castes not only dwell in close proximity but they also get involved in various economic and social activities that further broaden the issue of tribal identity. But the important point is that apart from various similar characteristics between caste and tribes, the tribes have always tried to maintain their own identity in a unique way, and the same effort to maintain the caste identity has also been done by the caste communities. Tribes in ancient and medieval context. The term tribe today we talk about was not distinctively used in ancient and medieval text. Even in rural India, the term for tribes and castes was together used as a jati. The terms like jana, which means ethnic group, and the terms like janapada, which means an ethnic territory, were used in texts of ancient times. Surjit Sinha, 1982, also mentioned terms like Atabika Rajas, which means forest kingdoms, and Pratyanta Deshas means frontier regions for various janas like Kirata, Sabara, Bhila, Nishada, and Abhira who resided in such regions. Sinha also points out that many of us today also label the scheduled tribes as jati. Even sometimes these jatis are also known as jangli jati, which means jati living in forest. Also, many of these tribal communities perceive the individuals from their own community as men and consider individuals from the other community or outside the tribal group as non-men or foreigners. Sinha further explains this by citing an example from one of the tribal communities named Santals. The Santals call their own people as Hor, means man, whereas they call the people outside their group as Diku, which means non-men or foreigners. Generally, the tribal communities are meant to have a very close and symbiotic relation with the forest. Tribes who are resided as a very vital part of forest ecosystem have derived various terms in Indian context. Devnath Debasis 1998 writes that the association of forest with the tribal communities throughout the history has made the tribes as a lord of the forest, and this has resulted in connoting these tribal groups thoroughly various names. The term like Vanyajati, which means forest dwelling communities, Banbasi, which meaning inhabitants of forest, and Vanyaputra, meaning forest dwellers, were also coined to these tribal communities. Later, the words like Adivasi, Pahari, Adim Jati, Janjati, Anusuchit Jati, and such Indian terms came up connoting the tribes generally. Transformation and changes among tribes. In Indian society, when we try to identify tribes, we also find two more communities which also live side by side with tribes. These two groups are peasants and castes. Usually, it becomes very difficult to classify and distinguish tribes from peasants. According to Wolf 1966, peasants are those for whom agriculture is livelihood and a way of life, not a business for profit. Referring to this definition, we can easily make an understanding that peasants and tribes are almost same in terms of their livelihood. But there is also some distinction between the groups. The peasants are usually part of wider society and a great tradition, whereas the tribes are not a part of a wider society. Apart from all these distinctions and classifications, we cannot ignore the transformation of tribes into caste and peasants. Generally, on transformation of tribes, two models of incorporation are discussed. B.K. Roy Burman 1994 talks of two models. One is the Hindu method of tribal absorption given by N.K. Bose, and the other model is Sanskritization propounded by M.N. Srinivas. The Hindu method of tribal absorption by N.K. Bose suggests that many of the interior hill and forest tribal groups who has remained untouched from the influences of other civilization slowly and gradually got fused into Hindu society and caste system. For example, the tribes like Bhil, Munda, Santals, Jong, Soara are to be named a few who were influenced by the Hindu method of tribal absorption. The other model through which the tribal transformation was further aggregated was Sanskritization and Hinduization. These processes had a tendency to attract the lower strata of the society to observe the lifestyle of dominant caste or dominant state of religion. In this process, they would turn themselves into a higher and dominant community of the region. Thus, many tribal groups were influenced by this process of transformation. But it was mainly Hinduization which actually was prevalent among the tribal communities than Sanskritization. Tribes who followed the process of Hinduization described themselves as Bhagats, not as Hindus. Thus, this created furthermore complications in identifying the tribal communities and more opinions aroused on the definition of tribes. But this process of transformation of tribes is a continuous and slow process which keeps on going even till today. So, students, let us summarize this model in brief. Tribe as a concept and as a notion has been debatable and challenging to define. Various definitions have been provided by scholars and researchers. Yet no single universal definition has been yet conceptualized. Tribe have been difficult to classify into fixed categories as the situation and environment varies from each group to another. Further, The history behind the origin of the term tribe has been much sensitive and critical. Thus, at present, defining a tribe is fixed manner has become the most challenging task yet. Although various issues regarding conceptualizing and transformation of tribes is being considered minutely, but at present there are many communities who are not yet recognized as a tribe. In fact, many tribes, many a times, the reservation policy by the government of India has further complicated the issue. Getting the tag of STs is being politicized to gain personal benefits and community reservations. At this time of crucial situation, it is the anthropologists who should be given a major role to come up with more clear and crystal category and characterize to define the term tribe. Thank you.